What's up, guys? This is One Concerned American. Thanks for listening to today's show. I want to cover the topic of human hunting. This is something that's been in the movies a lot in recent years, and in this video, I want to show you a couple of events in real life that I think prove there could be elite human hunting going on. And I also want to show you how this has been in the movies for decades and decades, and it's been right in front of our faces the whole time. So obviously, to start off, a lot of people have seen movies like The Hunger Games or even read the books, and we know that it's about kind of a dystopian future where the world is broken into all these different districts, or at least the United States is broken into all these different districts, and these children kind of combat each other in life and death situations. And you also have examples like The Purge, which are a little bit more explicitly about human hunting here in the United States, and it's a pretty violent series. They've even made it into a show, so it's obviously being pushed by the mainstream media and by Hollywood. And it's also got kind of an economic message in it too about poverty. Because if you remember in the movie, there were some people that would actually sell themselves to the elites to get money and protect their families during the purge. So I think that when you watch all of these movies, there's kind of an element of truth to all of them. And I want to cover a couple of examples where I think you can find that we have seen human hunting taking place right in front of our very eyes. Let's start off by looking at the Las Vegas shooting for a second. Now, if you or anyone you know was a victim of this, I'm terribly sorry about that. My heart goes out to all the victims. But I do believe if you look at the narrative here of what happened, the media or the government, somebody is lying. They're proven to do that anyway, so I just want to show you some inconsistencies about this shooting. First of all, you can check out this book. It's called The Las Vegas Deep State Massacre. It's by a couple of authors, and they actually have the transcript of the police recording at the time when they were talking on their scanners. And you can see here that at 38:30, they said confirmed. So we have two scenes because, these people are getting shot all over the place. The police are talking to each other. They're seeing gunshots from multiple directions. Witnesses who were there saw gunshots from multiple directions and from different hotel rooms. We can see if we go on at 45:05, it says confirming the Mandalay Bay and Alibaba/Giles are the two shooting locations. Do we have a third? And they keep talking about witnesses seeing shots all over the place. So something is definitely up. We can see that from the direction some of these bullets hit different buildings, that they were being shot from the street level. You can also see here in this image, this giant barrel looking structure was shot in the top corner, which is, in my opinion, evidence of a street level shooter. If you look at that residue there, it looks like it could have only come from someone shooting it from the ground level. It's also interesting if you look into it and you find out that Las Vegas actually had terrorism drills going on around the time of this massacre. It was posted 2 weeks before the massacre, and then it looks like there was some stuff removed about it. And this is something pretty common when we see false flags. A lot of people think that false flag means that the attack didn't happen or that people weren't really killed or that it's all crisis actors, but a false flag could mean that people are really getting killed. Just what they're telling you about who the shooter was is not quite the truth. And I think if you look into a lot of shootings, there are drills going on right at the same time the shootings are happening. I could tell you that I'm from South Carolina and there was a major shooting at a church here back in 2015. And if you go and look at the documentation, there was a scheduled active shooter drill in the area around that time. A lot of people know that during 9/11, there was a live exercise going on for the exact same situation of a plane being hijacked and committing some type of act of terror. It's very suspicious when you see that there are these drills going on around the same time as any type of attack, especially one that kills this many people and where this many people were shot. And I think there is some evidence of photo manipulation of the pictures that we have seen of him. For example, if you look at the top here, there's kind of a weird green hue that was added around his head. It looks like it was definitely photoshopped in. There's also some evidence that this hand here in the front is not even his hand. It looks totally different. If you look at the line around the edge of the hand sticking out in front of him, it just doesn't look very natural for the shadow. So if you look, there's a lot of photo manipulation evidence. And then I also think that it's kind of unusual. If you look at kind of the place where all these people were shot, it was just a wide open area. And if you look into the name paddock, it actually means an enclosed area used especially for pasturing or exercising animals. Like you would lead the sheep into the paddock. And I thought it was interesting when I looked it up. The definition actually said sheep in there. Because in my opinion, these elites that take part in these type of things or that order these type of things look at us like nothing but sheep or goy, basically. Another example I think we can look at and arguably say that this was an example of human hunting is Dick Cheney's quote unquote Quailgate hunting accident. If you look into this, he shot a man in the face while they were hunting quail. The man's name was Harry Whittington. And if you look into the story, Harry Whittington actually apologized to Dick Cheney after he was shot in the face. And Dick Cheney never apologized for this. And honestly, I think that something was there. I think there's a little bit more to this whole story. There's even a woman who, her name is Kathy O'Brien. She's written a book called Transformation of America. And the book is about people who claim to be victims of MK Ultra mind control type situations. The person in this book is actually claiming that they were hunted by Dick Cheney as kind of a game. And she actually claims that she was raped by him in some type of hunting type incident. And to me, I mean, with everything else we've seen and with some of the other stuff people believe, I honestly don't think that this is that far out there. I mean, you can actually see that some sites have written articles about this. One article says that the dark future of tourism, hunting humans. In the future, the mega rich will hunt humans as a spectacle of pleasure. Could our biggest fears become entertainment for future tourists? We also see an article that says, could Hunger Games become a reality? Hunting humans may be a hobby for the rich in the next 100 years. By 2200, hunting humans could be televised and an activity for stag does. Humans in the future will kill others in a claimed aim to reduce population size, although there will be a perverse thrill and excitement to it. So you can see it also says that this is all kind of based on the Hunger Games. So I don't think it's a coincidence that, there's a book written about this and then Hollywood makes it into these major movies and then people are writing articles saying it could come real. I think there kind of is an agenda behind this. And finally, if you look into most recently, a lot of people were talking about how, I think it was around December of 2017, Donald Trump signed an executive order blocking the property of people involved in human trafficking. And then a lot of people were talking about how about a month later, the Rothschilds sold this estate that they owned in Austria. And people were claiming that, human hunting took place on this ground and that's why they sold it. Me personally, I kind of question that theory because the land is in Austria. So the executive order wouldn't really have any effect there unless the Austrian government decided to work with Donald Trump on that. So I think that's kind of a dead end, but I do think that the Rothschilds possibly could have participated in something like this. You can see here at one of their elite parties that they had, a masquerade ball, you can see his wife wearing the deer head, which is kind of an unusual costume to wear, I think, at a masquerade ball, but, hey, to each his own. For the rest of this video, I want to talk about places that we've seen human hunting in different movies. And before I talk about this, I want you to keep in mind there's a lot of examples of this. And so if I don't mention one that you know about, leave it in the comment section and we can discuss it. Because when I researched this, there are tons of examples in movies, TV, video games. So I'm just going to show you some of the most important ones in my opinion. And I think that the process of how this stuff is revealed in Hollywood can best be described from this book by Michael A. Hoffman called Secret Societies and Psychological Warfare. He called this the revelation of the method. And this is a process wherein murderous deeds and hair-raising conspiracies involving wars, revolutions, decapitations, and every manner of horror show are first buried beneath a cloak of secrecy, and then, when finally accomplished and secured, slowly revealed to the unsuspecting populace who watch deep frozen as the hidden history is unveiled in the circulation of manuscripts. The revelation of the method is accomplished. So when you go and you watch these movies, they're actually revealing some things to you that go on behind the scenes. I'm not saying every movie. I mean, obviously, there's some pretty crappy movies out there, but some of them do have agendas behind them. And I think that the revelation of the method is definitely a way that they're kind of confessing what they do, and it's also mocking the fact that we can't really do anything about it. We're also being desensitized to all this violence. So let's get started with this list. I think the most interesting and the one you need to look into the most is this story that was called The Most Dangerous Game, and it got adapted into a major movie in 1932. The story came out in 1924, but it was made into a famous movie in 1932, and it's about a New York man who was a big game hunter. His boat crashes like in a Caribbean island, and then he's hunted by this Russian aristocrat. And there's been numerous adaptations of it in film and television. And actually, I believe that story entered the public domain in 2020. So expect to see a lot more references to this movie and this story as we go forward in history. It's definitely an interesting concept, and that's one of the first I could think of that referenced this idea. I think it's also interesting if you look into this movie Duel, because this was one of Steven Spielberg's first movies, and we all know that Steven Spielberg is into some pretty dark stuff. I mean, he's been accused of being a pedophile. We've seen that his daughter, who I believe is adopted, became a porn star, so there's some really interesting stuff about that. And it's about a man who's just driving down a highway, and then this truck driver basically follows him and tries to kill him, and you never really find out why. I think the next interesting example is this movie Deliverance. And this is kind of a disturbing movie if you've never seen it. It's about these men who go on a camping trip in South Carolina, and they're attacked by these vicious southern deep woods hillbillies that have messed up teeth, and one of their friends actually gets raped by one of these hillbillies while another one of them is tied up by the neck to a tree. So this is some pretty sick stuff. I mean, they made the guy squeal like a pig, and then their boy came in with the bow and arrow and saved their life. So, I mean, there's some good action in the movie, but it's definitely kind of weird, and it does show that there's people of all walks of life that participate in this type of stuff. In the same vein, there's also this movie called Southern Comfort, and this is about a group of soldiers who are doing a military training exercise in Louisiana, and they're kind of in the swamps, and they accidentally shoot at some locals, and next thing they know, they're in a guerrilla war where they're getting viciously killed. And I think it's kind of interesting when you see this stuff going on in the Deep South. Like, even if you watch that show True Detective, a lot of that show has been in the Deep South, and you've seen a lot of this kind of ritual satanic abuse type stuff going on, and a lot of murder. So I think that's a pretty interesting thing if you look into that. I'm also a big fan of the Running Man movie. You know, I think it kind of shows how athletes are exploited. I also think that it's kind of a mock of American Gladiators and showing how that kind of glorified violence as well. And if you watch The Running Man, it's about this dude who is wrongly convicted for a crime. He was a soldier who refused to basically murder a bunch of civilians, so they threw him in jail. They blamed him for the murder of all the civilians. And then they allowed him to participate in this life or death game where he has to go to all these arenas and compete against these different guys. And, you know, there was one guy with a chainsaw. That was a pretty interesting battle. You know, there was a guy with a flamethrower that was played by Jim Brown, who's one of the best, you know, running backs in the NFL of all time. There was also this dude who was like an opera singer that could like shoot electricity out of his hands. And, you know, the movie's extremely violent. You're also watching a movie that is in a TV show inside of the movie. You're watching other people watch this, and you're seeing how kind of Americans are just like obsessed with violence, basically. It's a really interesting movie. There's also another one called Surviving the Game with Ice-T. It's a really interesting one. Basically, these elite guys, they tell this homeless guy that they're basically going to pay him to come along on this hunting trip and be a guide. And then they kind of tell him at the last minute, like, hey, we're actually going to hunt you and try to kill you. So he has to fight back against all these guys. And I think it's kind of interesting. If you look into Ice-T, you know, he's in a lot of interesting songs, and, you know, he's been on things like Law and Order. So I think this movie definitely has some pretty cool hidden messages in it if you check that out. Obviously, you got to have the Hostel series on here, because if you haven't seen it, this is about young people who visit Europe and they stay in these cheap hotels. There are these elite doctors that pay to have them snatched up. and then they torture them basically. They use devices to injure these people and maim them and cripple them, chop them up into pieces. And, the people basically start fighting back and try to escape. There's also a movie called The Naked Prey. This is from 1965. There's a man who's a safari guide, and he runs afoul on an African tribe that kills his clients. They strip him naked and turn him loose on the savannah to be hunted down. So this kind of plays on racism in the time and things like that. Definitely a cool movie to check out. The Hitcher is another great one about a man who basically hitchhikes and just continues to hunt down people that give him rides and whoever he can find on the road. Another great one. You got Punishment Park, and this was an interesting one that was kind of filmed like a documentary. It actually mocked how the police treated protesters at this time. The whole idea of the movie is that this group of anti-war protesters are let go in the California desert with no food or water, and they're chased by police officers and National Guardsmen as a training exercise. If they reach the end of the course in 3 days, they'll be freed, and if they're captured, they face prison sentences. So that's definitely a pretty cool movie if you haven't seen that one. I haven't seen it yet. If you have, let me know in the comments section. I definitely want to know what you thought about it. Another one of my favorites that I have seen is Hard Target. This is a John Woo movie with Jean-Claude Van Damme. And, he's got the mullet. You can see him here biting into the tail of a rattlesnake. I mean, just a real badass movie. But he gets caught up in this young girl's quest to find her father and learns that he was abducted by this businessman who likes to hunt people for sport. The first cut of this movie was so violent it got an NC-17 rating. So definitely very violent movie. Definitely shows you again that there are rich people that like to hunt humans. You got this movie, The Eliminator. The main character is Boss Rutan. He's like an old MMA fighter. If you've ever seen him before, he's one of my favorites. Again, the whole premise of the movie is these elite people hunting humans and they have to fight back. Another recent one is called Happy Hunting. And this is a pretty good movie. It's about a man who's basically a drifter. He finds out that he has a son in Mexico, tries to go find him, and then he gets caught up with these psychotic rednecks, and they're trying to hunt him, and so he basically has to fight back. And then a lot of people probably heard about this movie that came out recently called The Hunt. At first, there was a lot of controversy about this movie. Check it out if you have a chance. I haven't seen it myself. I've really been trying to cut back on, paying to go see movies at the theater. If there's a movie we want to see, we basically just wait till it comes out on Redbox or something, try to rent it as cheap as we can. If you have seen The Hunt, let me know what you think about that. I also wanted to point out a few video games that talk about human hunting. If you've ever seen Unreal Tournament, this was a game that I even played in the early 2000s. And I think this game goes back to the 90s. I mean, it's a pretty old game. They had several remakes of it, several sequels. It's about people killing each other in a tournament. You have the game Manhunt. This is one I've actually played pretty recently. This was made by Rockstar, who makes the Grand Theft Auto games. And in this game, the main character's name is James Earl Cash. He's up for the death penalty, but his death is faked. And he gets released on the street. He finds out that he's basically in the middle of a movie. And this director is telling him where to go, and he has to actually fight for his life because there are hunters who are being paid to try to kill him. And it's all being recorded on these cameras because the director makes snuff films about people being killed in real life. The game had a lot of controversy because of the violence in it. I'm not really a person that thinks video games cause violence, but I do agree the game is extremely violent. So, hey, if you have a kid who's not 17, and their brain isn't fully developed, maybe not let them play it. You also have this game called The Culling, which is another example of a human hunting tournament style game, kind of like the Hunger Games. So you could keep going on. Like I said, I wanted to just do a short video and talk about some of these. So if there's a game or a movie or something you've seen in the mainstream media that references human hunting, let us know in the comments and we can continue this discussion. It's something I absolutely believe in. I don't think they just throw these things in the movies for no reason. So that's just one man's opinion. Thanks for the view, and make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. God bless.
A new world order. A new world order. A new world order.
And
we are, as a people, opposed to secret societies.
This is extremely dangerous to democracy.